Baylor missing the NCAA tournament, BYU winning the national championship, and Bill Self leaving Kansas. All in a good day's work. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast. I'm trying to walk in the room. Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Co-hosting today is Cameron Stewart because he talks real funny.
Usually I'm the one who's got something going on in the background, usually, but it's not dinner time, so we're
walks in just banging pans together when she hears you recording every time. BYU stunned Arizona on the road after losing in Provo just a couple of weeks ago to that same Wildcats team. Kansas might be back. Baylor missing March Madness. We'll start there, then talk Bill Self leaving Kansas. Not that crazy of an idea when you hear that he quasi-interviewed with the team last offseason. And then we're going to do a football tournament. The SEC is talking about doing a tournament to seed its teams for the college football playoff instead of just an SEC championship. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Wow. At the time of recording, to shoot you very straight, Sunday's slate is not over. There are a couple of Big 12 games that shouldn't be consequential to March Madness in there.
And also shouldn't be on Sunday, by the way.
Yeah, I hate
We're not the Big East. We're not the Big Ten. That shouldn't happen.
And it's in the afternoon, too.
Yeah,
it's a weird spot to put it.
It's
BYU going on the road to beat Arizona was probably the biggest storyline from Saturday. Kansas getting back in the driver's seat was up there. TCU losing, really at this point to me, almost any hope of March Madness. And Iowa State going toe-to-toe with Houston despite injury issues. But maybe before we jump into BYU or Kansas or Iowa State, Houston, is Baylor going to miss March Madness? How do you lose to Colorado and give the Buffs their second win in Big 12 play all year?
Well, it's not quite unprecedented, but very seldomly precedented to lose to Colorado in this conference. It's not often that in the last week in February you are doubling your conference win total. They are going to make the tournament. Lenardi had him at a 97% chance coming into this. And I've talked about this on my show a few times, Drake, is like, should they be? Because in my time and your time as well, really, watching Baylor, which isn't terribly long, about a decade, right? Like, I've seen teams that have played in the NIT. I've seen teams that barely squeak into the tournament. I've seen a team win a national championship. I kind of know what it looks like, a Baylor team making the NCAA tournament. This does not look like a team that should be making the NCAA tournament, but they're going to. And part of that is, Big 12 name brand, sure. And part of it's Baylor name brand, which I didn't think we'd be talking about, but they've earned some credit over the last 5 years or so, enough that you see Baylor and you're like, oh yeah, that's a tournament team. Okay. They'll win 20 games. Sure. That's a tournament team. And yet they really haven't done much to prove that to me. And Saturday was, the worst of it, losing to the worst team in the Big 12, just going through the motions for 38 minutes like they do most games. And somehow, some way, they have a top 5 pick in the NBA draft on the team. And it's one of the least talented teams I've seen rooting for Baylor. They don't have shot makers. They don't have shot creators. They have nothing offensively. It was bad, man. It was just like, you got to go to ESPN Plus. You got to scroll through like 40 games to get to this. And they're playing in an arena that's 40% full that nobody cares about. And, one of your starting guards is sick because he ate a bad batch of McDonald's, and you lose to the worst team in the conference. It's a bad weekend for Baylor, man. Bad weekend. And we'll see what Lenardi comes out with this week. They've been on 8-9 line, even though they were flipping back and forth, like win-loss the last 8 games. That streak's broken, by the way, 2 straight losses. It's not great, man. It's not great.
No, it's not. And years past have said that Baylor is in the last 3 years, they're a second round exit to a good Big East team. Like the worst case scenario for the Bears is a physical Big East team, a la a Creighton they got a couple of years ago. And this year it could be anybody. It could be genuinely anyone in round 1, and Bears are possibly going to be in trouble getting a St. John's possibly that roughs you up, or even if you're 8-9 with UConn,
Gonzaga,
smell you later.
Good luck.
BYU, I have said all season long, BYU irks me more than any Big 12 team because they just won't pick 6 guys. They won't pick 6 or 7 guys. They will play everyone who exists on the roster. Only one player in the game against Arizona got more than 30 minutes of playing time, and they played 11 guys. But maybe, just maybe, Kevin Young's looking around the room going, now what, everybody? The rest of the teams in this league are tired, not us. We roll 11
running altitude. We play everybody. We're just going to wear these teams out. I mean, yeah, I get, and when you're scoring at the clip that they are and the way they want to play that NBA style, then you probably do have to rotate that many guys. Well, maybe not that many, but you do have to have a longer rotation than I think some teams have to. But other than not just picking 5 or 6 guys, they're also like not picking if they're really good or not. They're kind of like Baylor on that same plane, but I think you feel
it was like
better.
Me when I was in 6th grade, and coach was like, get in there and foul their best player. We're going to put you in, and you're going to be the foul guy. BYU's got 6 of those.
Yeah, it's lovely to watch, I tell you. And Arizona, now I have questions about. Like, I know, not serious questions, not should they be in the top 25, but it's like, man, a week and a half ago, they looked like they could sneak up and possibly catch Houston here. I know they lost to Houston last weekend, but could like be that second team in the Big 12. And they didn't look that great against Baylor, and Baylor didn't look very good either. And so Arizona beats them on the road. And then they dropped this one to BYU, a team that they handled pretty well the last time they played them. Now all we talked about last week of like this kind of top 4 and then next tier being pretty clear for the Big 12 gets a little messy. Now Arizona's out of that top tier, and can we keep Iowa State in that top tier? They were down a couple guys, put up a pretty damn good fight against Houston. Baylor, are they still in that mid tier? Because they look bad right now. So just all that hard work that we had as a conference to make this picture a little bit more clear, you just like drop some water on a developing photograph. Ask your parents about that.
Big 12 referees are bad. That call at the end of the BYU-Arizona game sends Saunders to the line is a touchy one. BYU's been the beneficiary of a couple of those here recently that have gone their way. After Kevin Young came to the podium and said, I was in the NBA for a long time, I can't believe that they officiate games this way in the Big 12. It's a knockdown drag out. You mentioned, I think you're spot on with Iowa State. Banged up, but put up a fight as good as you could possibly look in a loss, kept it within single digits and fought in the second half harder you did the first half. I think West Virginia, we can go ahead and write them off as well as TCU as far as March Madness goes. But 2 of my favorite teams in the NIT, they're going to go out there and face Indiana in Madison Square Garden in the Final Four of the NIT. Cincinnati might be there with them as well.
Give me Indiana playing at Schollmeyer Arena, please.
Oh, that's great. That's
punch
great.
it out.
I think that
would be. Wait, I'm sorry. One second for this, please. Can we just imagine this for a second? Indiana is then going into a coaching search where they're gonna be saying like, we're gonna lure NBA executives to come coach for us because we're Indiana. Oh, by the way, our next game is in Fort Worth in the NIT to play TCU. Oh, that would be so good, man. I can't.
Maybe they'll talk to Jamie Dixon in there. Like, what do you think?
That wouldn't be a bad pull for them.
Come hang out with us a little bit. Coming up, Bill Self leaving Kansas is not that crazy. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is easy and it's fun. And this is a daily fantasy game where you can just go in, you can pick a couple of guys and be like, oh, I want over on points in the NBA for this player, under on points for this player. And you know what? If you get it right, you can win a whole lot with PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the place to go. You can download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly from PrizePicks when you play that first $5 lineup. Again, pick more or less, win up to 1,000 times your cash. Quick and easy. Make picks in less than 60 seconds. Fast payouts. Money hits the account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. Taco Tuesday? PrizePicks offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Again, Locked On College for $50 instantly with your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. That's PrizePicks. Bill Self leaving Kansas. This was a more prevalent storyline after the Jayhawks were roughed up against Utah and roughed up against BYU. Bill Self comes to the podium and says, I really thought this would be a fun getaway for our team. We'd go to the mountains and find serenity. We actually all hate each other and need to please get away from one another. They win on Saturday. It all kind of comes out in the midweek that Self was in conversations for the Oklahoma State job. This is Brett McMurphy saying that Bill Self spoke to them, answered questions about the job, offered opinion, and is now a member at Karsten Creek. He said one of the country's top golf courses. Okay. He's an out of area member of their golf country club thing. And this all, to me, the woes of Kansas last year, the woes they've faced this year, kind of points toward Bill Self. If he's going to make that Oklahoma State move, making that move, if he's going to retire, this seems like either you stay there for 10 years, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. He might be getting in that villain territory.
Yeah, it's obviously weird and far-fetched to be like, oh, yeah, Bill Self will leave Kansas to go to Oklahoma State. But then again, it's like, well, if any time, last year was a weird season for Kansas, and he basically says at the end of it, like, I checked out 3 weeks ago after they got blown out of the tournament by a kind of mid Gonzaga team, and it was like, what was that? What did he say there? Like, you're not really supposed to say that. That's very odd. And honestly, the way we're looking at it now, I know they won on Saturday, but would you be shocked if he tells you at the end of the season this year, hey, I checked out 3-4 weeks ago? Wouldn't shock me the way they're playing. And this is back-to-back years where they've had massive preseason expectations. This year they were preseason number one. It kind of falls apart in the way that Kansas falls apart. You know, Indiana falls apart. They don't make the tournament. Kansas becomes a 4 seed. But the thing that I found interesting throughout all this is people being like, oh, yeah, I mean, what? This happens. They asked him for advice. He helped him. And I was like, does this happen?
Yeah,
like I could see Carolina going to Roy Williams or Duke going to Mike Krzyzewski. Those guys don't coach anymore. Like, do you think this just happens all the time? I don't know. Do you think if Scott Drew left Baylor right now that Mack Rhodes would be calling up Jerome Tang to ask for advice or to hire him? Like, that's what we're talking about here. I don't think that's just common practice that, you know, every time Oklahoma State comes open that Bill Self's like, yeah, here's who I'd look at and here's why. It's odd when they're in your own conference specifically. It's very odd. And it did take a while for Oklahoma State to make this hire. I remember thinking that they were going to go get John Jacobs, who ends up going to FAU, the former Baylor assistant. And I was like, Oklahoma State still hasn't made a hire here. And so this is odd. There's something fishy about this one. Why would you leave Kansas at the end of the day? Except the villain thing.
The question of, does it matter that he played there in 1985? You know, like, does it matter today, 40 years later, that you're an alum? And again,
which comes up a lot in all college sports.
Right. We all think, oh, well, Scott Drew grew up close to Indiana, must be going to Indiana. And you saw with Mark Pope takes a job that many people thought he'd bitten off more than he could chew by going to Kentucky to go back to what he effectively called home. And for Self, like, yeah, of course, you're rooting, I guess, your alma mater. But again, you're competing against them twice a year, beating the crap out of them for decades on end now as the head coach at Kansas. Is it worth, especially as a more senior coach, to take on a role like that at Oklahoma State? Again, this could be like a John Calipari leaving Kentucky to go to Arkansas, and they're probably going to miss the tournament this year. You know, is it worth tarnish? Because I think if you're Bill Self and you leave Kansas, it's a Kim Mulkey Baylor deal. It rivals that.
Go one of two ways, yeah.
Because now once you leave, you're not the statue coach. You're not the welcome back, we love you. It's, I never really liked Bill Self. The national championships were fun, but he was a scumbag who had FBI investigations going on.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point. I want to talk about the alum thing, because we all of us who do this and are watching and listening to this, we love our alma maters. We know what that poll would be like for us. But like, putting this into perspective, like, Oklahoma State's barely in this conference. I feel for them. It used to be a great basketball
football
program.
And basketball, by the way. They're the worst.
Sucks.
Their 2024-25 is the worst athletic year that any school has had in the Big 12.
They are wrestlers, okay? Like, that's what they are at this point. Like, Rick Pitino having this great season at St. John's. Is anyone thinking, oh, that's where UMass's first call should be? He played there. Of course he'll come and rescue UMass, or Providence is not calling up Billy Donovan. And that's not that far off from what we're talking about here. Oklahoma State is that much of a project, even at the Power 4 level. So I don't think it does matter because A, he's already coached there. He took them to a Final Four. And B, it is Kansas we're talking about. These guys, if they leave, they're leaving for the NBA. They're not leaving for their I'll just get one for the old alma mater, a guy in his mid-50s or whatever it is, 60. I don't know how old he is. Not just leaving for the grandeur of his alma mater and to hear the same old songs and go to the same old barbecue places. I doubt it. And we hear it all the time. We hear it in football as well as basketball that, this is his place. This is where he would go. It's like that ship has sailed, man. He left for a bigger job 20 years ago. I do think it's weird though, this kind of process and what's coming out here from this McMurphy report, that how often has that happened? They've had 3 or 4 coaches since he was there. Does he get the call every time? Does it take a new athletic director? Did it take 10 years of him being away? I don't know. It's just you think Texas Tech the next time? You think when Texas Tech was looking at Grant McCaslin, they called up Chris Beard?
Yeah.
He's like, hey,
what do you think, Chris?
What do you think about this guy? Huh?
Could you advise us?
I know it didn't end well here, but
I like to picture
Mac Rhodes calling up Dave Bliss. Like, hey, we need some new assistants on this team. I just doubt it. I
like to think Mike Gundy has 4 or 5 beers, gets behind the wheel, gets in his car, calls up Bill Self. And it's like
Mike Gundy has a couple beers, gets behind the wheel, drives to a payphone, to call Bill Self.
Just to say, hey, just thinking of you. Just anytime you want to come to Oklahoma State, they'll take them with open arms. Coming up, football tournaments. That's right, college football tournaments to end the conference season. That's what the SEC wants to do. I think we're going to have to do it too. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, today's show brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I go to make money. I bought a house this week. A mortgage is a lot. How do I offset that? The NBA and college basketball live betting. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. Even if you miss the opening tip-off or want a fourth quarter comeback, you can place those bets and combine them into a same-game parlay. I love the live betting feature because it makes every moment exciting. I didn't miss my chance. I get to actually put money into a game even though I missed it beforehand. FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, visit FanDuel.com to join today. $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet just hits. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. This is brand new and maybe not good. With the college football playoff format changing, the SEC wants 4. They want 4 auto bids. How would they determine those auto bids? Well, I'm glad you asked. Sources confirmed to On3 Sport, this for Pete Nakos, that early discussions for the SEC have included the possibility of 3 and 4 games in a tournament during championship weekend. The #1 team in the SEC plays the #8 team. 2 versus 7. You can go down the line to determine via a football tournament who will go to the college football playoff. When did you March Madness my college football?
I think it's kind of brilliant.
Oh no. Really?
Let me because I've been sifting through this the whole afternoon. It's like at the end of the day, I don't think it's a how do I put this? Like, I don't love it, but it is kind of brilliant what they're going for.
The On3 tweet that says potential championship weekend matchups. The first comment is what? Yes, which is just a great response.
It is kind of what we think when we see it. It's like you're not technically adding more football games, like in terms of player safety health. Okay. I actually think it's brilliant if you don't have the auto bids. Because that's how the SEC can control the narrative without having the auto bids. Think about it. Like, let's play it out this year with, the Alabamas and the Ole Misses that just miss out. If you put them in, this kind of tournament at the end of the season, your Georgias and your Texases, they're already in, right? Because we're not putting them as the four. This is not for the only 4 spots. This is without automatic qualifying. So then if you're the SEC, this is a way to sneak teams in there. Well, you say, Arizona State played Iowa State last weekend and Alabama beat Georgia. It's actually a brilliant way to do it. The way that it's put in the auto bids, and just a little full stop there. If you do lose, you lost to Georgia or you lost to Alabama, right? Correct.
You didn't get the people who are like, oh, why would you lose an extra game against the number 3 team in the country?
It doesn't matter to the committee. If you're losing to a team like that, it doesn't matter. Right. And then you say, well, we had Georgia on the schedule twice. If you're Alabama, we played them twice. Who did Boise State play? And it becomes that again, just to the nth degree. You just have extra ammo if you're the SEC. I will say this: if the SEC does this, regardless of what conferences have for auto bids, the other conferences I feel need to do something like that. Mm-hmm. Did you get that? Like reading that of like, oh shoot, man! If the SEC does this, it feels kind of because of what we just laid out right there. Like if the Big 12 does that without auto bids, you might be able to sneak an extra team in there.
Yeah.
I get it.
If the SEC does it, we have to. There's no doubt about this, that if the SEC or Big Ten say we're going to have conference championship weekend, where in our conference we have 4 games, the Big 12 will have to do the same thing. Yeah. And it will be to the Big 12's detriment because when Iowa State, who's number 24, beats number 6 Arizona State or number 6 BYU, now you're talking about taking those teams out of contention for a playoff spot, and people are going to still laugh at Iowa State, who was 23rd in the country. Now they're 17th. And now BYU dropped to 15. And you're looking at a 14-team playoff, and you're saying, well, the Big 12 shot itself in the foot. So if there aren't automatic qualifiers, if there are not, then you're just asking the Big 12 to lose an extra game, whereas in the SEC, based on ESPN's FPI, you're asking them to bolster their strength of schedule. They're not losing another game.
Right.
They're just adding to their strength of schedule, whereas in the Big 12, the loss would ultimately hurt you.
That's what I mean. That's why it's brilliant, from the SEC standpoint. I don't want it to happen, but if this does happen, which I think it might at some point, then you have this incredible weekend of college football right up at the beginning of December. You have taken all the eyes off the rest of the conference championships. You're probably doing kind of like the playoff. You're probably doing one Thursday night. You're doing 2 on or whatever. I mean, 1 on Thursday, 1 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, whatever it is. And you have cornered the weekend before you're about to do it again, because you're going to have 3 teams playing in the first the on-campus weekend first round of the 12 team, 14 team, whatever the hell team playoff. Yeah. So it makes perfect SEC sense. It would. There's something uneasy about it, though. Every move they've made, the SEC that is, in the last 2 years since Texas and Oklahoma, there's just something. There's this monopolizing. You ever see what's the movie with the trees? The Lorax.
The Lorax, and there's that guy.
Happening.
And Blair Witch, and he keeps chopping down the trees. George of the Jungle. And then as he's chopping down the trees, he just gets a little too greedy there after a while. And does he become the Lorax? How does that work?
I think the Lorax speaks for the trees.
Okay. So the Lorax.
So this is some other schmo. This is someone everyone hates. It's like Rodney Terry's cutting down the trees.
Is good guy? Okay.
Yeah, Lorax, good guy.
Dennis Rodman. He's got a real. He's cutting down the trees.
Yes,
that's what the
you're saying. Dennis Rodman was a Lorax for a second. Very likable guy. Very agreeable guy.
Orange hair. So that I think the Lorax was orange. This is what it feels like. Is they're chopping down the trees, and then the ESPN is the air guy that wants to take all the air and sell it to you. They have control of the air. And I really wish I had seen the movie more recently or read the book. It's a hell of a novel.
Theodore Geisel, yeah.
Could give it to great guy, by the way. Never controversial at all. Don't
great mass hole.
Don't Google that.
Resident.
I am uneasy about this. Specifically, the part where the Big 12 is going to have to assimilate. The Big 12 is going to have to replicate.
That's the problem for me. Yeah, is that it's going to hurt the other conferences outside of the Big 10 and the SEC. It's just one more thing to prop those two programs up under the guise of this is great for everybody. This is great for college football. It's great for the networks. It's great for the fans. And really, it sucks for the other guys.
I am cool with this part is in a potential championship weekend, if they do it this way, where it's 6 teams and the SEC has 4 auto bids, then you're playing number 1 versus number 2. And that is for a bye in the 12-team playoff or a bye in a 14-team playoff. That's fun. Then you have the 3 versus the 6, the 4 versus the 5. And now a South Carolina who is hot at the right time can beat an Alabama who was not. And now South Carolina has a better shot to get in. If the Big 12 could somehow replicate that with success, I'd feel a lot better. Now, BYU fans can't complain. Now, at this point, Colorado fans can't complain. You've gotten your shot. And we saw with BYU and Colorado facing off in a bowl game this year, kind of what that would look like. What it would be like to have post-regular season a Big 12 matchup that felt like it had more on the line. That one, it was just fighting for a trophy in the Alamo Bowl. But we all had there was extra zest to it because of those 2 schools.
Can I just suggest something born out of that then?
Sure.
Like, why don't we have more inter-conference bowl games? Because I'm watching sports this last week, and everyone talks about how bad the NBA All-Star Game is and how great the Four Nations hockey tournament was because there was something to play for. And like, we're never going to get up for the Liberty Bowl. Tech and Arkansas, I know they used to be rivals and everything, or whatever. Baylor and Vanderbilt in the Texas Bowl all those years ago. Why don't you just make that Tech versus Baylor in the Texas Bowl?
Yeah.
I don't know the logistics of where the money's coming from other conferences and all that BS, but like that is how you make those bowl games more interesting.
Yeah, that's fun.
You play 2 teams who played each other, who have something against each other. Mm-hmm. That's how you make the Pinstripe Bowl interesting.
Or you do USA, you like 3 nations, like Big 12.
3 nations facing off.
USA, Australia, which is just like the best punting team of all time, and then
each team plays by their own rules.
Samoa, or just we just call it Pacific Islander, and it's a
BYU
lot
plus Utah. Just combining the roster.
And honestly, like they would have a fight. They would be very good. They would be very, very good. That's how you make the postseason in the Big 12 more enticing. You cancel the college football playoff. Let the SEC and Big 10 do that. You do America, Pacific Islanders, and Australia in a 3 nations Big 12 face-off. That's Cameron Stewart at Real Cam Stewart on Twitter. And this has been It Always Will Be. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.